So another technique for making awesome synth bass sounds is not a new one. It's something that dates back even into the 80s, maybe even before, when engineers would use the oscillator on a console, the tone generator, and they would dial it down to like 50, 60, 70 hertz and open it up with a gate that was sidechained to the kick drum. And what that would do was every time the kick hit, this oscillator would open up and you'd have this otherworldly, gigantic low frequency content happening. I'll show you what that sounds like a bit, because here's what you might hear in kind of a house music-ish drum kit. Okay, fine, but let's say that I take a synthesizer, give it just a big fat sine wave at a very low frequency, and have that hit at the same time as the kick drum with a little bit of a delay on the attack so that the transient punch of the kick hits you and doesn't crowd out the bass or vice versa. Here's what that bass sounds like on its own. Maybe not that interesting by itself, but check this out. When you combine the bass with that drum kit, I'm going to play the drum kit on its own back here, and right about here, you'll hear that oscillator kick in. Here comes that oscillator. I mean, that sounds huge. I love it. A big, fat sub bass just paired with the kick. And it's not uncommon to hear this in all types of music. House music, drum and bass, pop music, whatever. The other component of this is that we've got this very mid-range forward bass that's kind of distorted and aggressive. And yeah, most people hear that as a bass sound. It's low notes, it's in a low register, but the reality is that that thing is shelved, like pretty much there's nothing in there from 200 hertz or under. You'll notice we've got a high pass filter engaged at 213 hertz. And on top of that, this is a pretty fun trick, just throwing a bass amp and a bass cabinet simulator on there. And again, the bass frequencies are dropped a bit in comparison with the mids and the treble, so that what you've got is something that, once again, is really, really aggressive in the mid-range. And though it's kind of perceived as a bass sound, there's no actual bass frequency content in there. And that's what gives it that kind of aggressive, right in your, like, hit you in the mouth kind of sound. So once again, when you pair that mid-centric bass with a very deep sub-bass coupled to the kick, you get a pretty intense situation, which can readily be applied to a ton of different electronic music genres. So once again, we're going to start back in this region before the sub-bass kicks in here, and you'll hear what it sounds like having just a drum kick in the mid-bass, and then that big fat sub-bass kick in. I don't know about you. That's fun to me. So once again, use two basses. Shelve one off. Shelf it off, but like 200 hertz and below. Just take out all the stuff there and let it be just mids and highs. And then couple that to a very simple, beefy sub bass, and you can get a larger-than-life, hard-hitting synth bass combo.